You can consider yourself weak if you don't work on the following things about yourself. And the reason they haven't said it is not because they don't love you. It's because they love you too much to risk the discomfort that truth sometimes creates. But I am going to say it because I think you came here today for exactly this kind of honesty. Here it is, everything you have been trying to fix on the outside of your life, the money, the relationships, the career, the health, the sense that things aren't quite working the way they should, all of it, every single piece of it, is a reflection of something on the inside that has not yet been built. And no amount of external strategy, no better plan, no different circumstance, will produce lasting change until that internal foundation is in place. You have been renovating the furniture in a house with a cracked foundation. And the crack doesn't care how beautiful the furniture is. I know that might feel like an oversimplification. I know your situation is complex, and the obstacles you face are real. I am not dismissing any of that. But I want you to honestly consider something for a moment. Think about the areas of your life where you have tried the hardest, where you have made the most plans, set the most goals, read the most books, taken the most courses, and think about the results those efforts have produced over time. If the results have consistently fallen short of the intention, the problem is almost certainly not the strategy. The problem is the foundation beneath the strategy. Because the same strategy that produces remarkable results in one person's hands produces almost nothing in another's. And the difference between those two people is not talent or luck or timing. It is the depth and quality of the person implementing the strategy. It is the foundation. Here is a question I want you to sit with. Not answer, sit with. If you had more money today, significantly more, enough to remove the financial pressure you're currently living under, would your life be fundamentally different 5 years from now? Most people say yes immediately. But if you look at the evidence, at the documented experience of people who receive sudden windfalls, who win lotteries, who inherit wealth they didn't build, the evidence suggests something more complicated. Because money, in the hands of a person who has not yet built the internal foundation to steward it, tends to amplify what is already there. It makes the generous person more generous. It makes the careless person more careless. It makes the anxious person more anxious. Money is a multiplier. And a multiplier applied to a number that hasn't been built into something solid yet, that is not a solution. It is a magnification of the existing problem. The same principle applies to opportunity, to relationships, to any external resource you believe would change your life. They are all multipliers. And the question is never whether the multiplier is available. The world is full of multipliers. The question is always what it has to multiply. A ladder placed against a wall with no foundation beneath it does not help you climb higher. It falls. The wall falls. And you find yourself, once again, picking up the pieces and looking for a better ladder, when the problem was never the ladder. The problem was always the wall. And building the wall, the slow, unglamorous, deeply personal work of building yourself from the inside out, is the work that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Not because they are lazy, because they were never clearly told that it was the work. Because nobody stood in front of them and said, "This, right here, is the only place to begin." I want to be very specific about what I mean when I say, build yourself, because that phrase is used so casually in personal development circles that it has almost lost its meaning. I am not talking about reading more books, though reading has its place. I am not talking about attending more seminars, though learning matters. I am not talking about the performance of self-improvement, the morning routines posted on social media, the journal covers, the aesthetic of growth. I am talking about something harder and quieter and more fundamental than any of that. I am talking about the development of character, the building of the internal qualities, the discipline, the integrity, the emotional resilience, the clear sense of personal values and the daily commitment to living by them that make a person capable of handling what life offers. The qualities that, when present, make almost any external strategy work. And when absent, ensure that almost none of them do. Think about the people you have known in your life. Not the most talented, not the most educated, not the ones born with the most advantages, but the ones whose lives seem to actually work. The ones who face hardship and recover. The ones who build things that last. The ones who seem, despite setbacks and complications and the ordinary unfairness of life, to be moving in a direction they chose rather than one that simply happened to them. What do those people have in common? It is almost never a particular skill or credential. It is something harder to name but unmistakable when you encounter it. A kind of internal solidity, a groundedness, a sense that they know who they are and are not particularly threatened by circumstances that challenge that knowledge. They have built themselves, and because of that, everything they touch, every opportunity, every relationship, every challenge, responds to them differently than it responds to people who haven't done that work. Now I want to ask you something more personal. When was the last time you invested in yourself the way you invest in the things around you? When was the last time you gave to your own development, your own character, your own emotional maturity, your own clarity about who you are and what you stand for, the kind of sustained, serious, non-negotiable attention that you give to your job, your household, your responsibilities to other people? Because most people, if they are honest, will admit that the answer is rarely or never, or not in a way that felt meaningful. Most people treat self-development as something they'll get to when the urgent things are handled. But the urgent things are never all handled. There is always another demand, another obligation, another fire to put out. And self-development, treated as optional, remains permanently optional. And the foundation that was supposed to be built remains unbuilt. And the multipliers keep multiplying whatever is already there. Here is what I want you to understand before we go any deeper. Building yourself first is not selfish. I want to say that clearly, because I know that for many people in this audience, particularly those who have spent decades putting other people's needs before their own, the idea of prioritizing your own development can feel indulgent, even irresponsible. But consider the alternative. A person who has not built a strong internal foundation cannot give from strength. They can only give from depletion. They can only offer what they have, and what they have is constantly diminishing. The person who builds themselves first, who develops their discipline, their clarity, their emotional resilience, their capacity for genuine contribution, that person becomes a source rather than a drain. They give more, not less. They show up more fully, not less. They are more available to the people they love, not less, because they are operating from a place of genuine capacity rather than chronic exhaustion. I want to plant a seed here that is going to grow throughout the rest of this conversation. The seed is this: you are the primary asset in your own life. Not your bank account. That is a number that can change in either direction depending on circumstances you may not fully control. Not your job title. That is a role assigned by someone else, contingent on conditions that could shift tomorrow. Not even your relationships, as precious as they are, because relationships are between people, and the quality of every relationship in your life is directly proportional to the quality of the person you are bringing to it. You, the actual you, the character, the values, the discipline, the emotional depth, the capacity for growth, you are the asset that everything else depends on. And yet most people spend almost no time deliberately developing that asset. They polish the furniture. They tend the garden. They maintain the car. But the primary asset, the one that determines the value and trajectory of everything else, they leave largely to chance. So before we talk strategy, before we talk about the practical steps and the daily practices and the specific changes you can make starting tomorrow, I need you to make a shift in how you see this conversation. This is not a conversation about what to do differently. It is a conversation about who to become. And those are not the same conversation. The what to do conversation can be had in 30 minutes. Read this, follow that system, implement these 5 steps. And that conversation is valuable, genuinely valuable, but only for the person who has done the deeper work first. For the person who has built the foundation. For the person who has decided, clearly and without ambiguity, who they are and what they stand for and what kind of daily life that identity requires. That is the conversation we are having today. And I am grateful you are here for it. I want to tell you about something I have observed so consistently, across so many different people, in so many different circumstances, that I have come to think of it as one of the most reliable patterns in human development. And the pattern is this: when a person genuinely builds themselves, when they do the real, deep, sustained work of developing their character, their discipline, their values, their emotional clarity, the external areas of their life begin to improve without being the direct object of their attention. The finances improve, not because they studied finance, but because a disciplined, clear-thinking, high-integrity person makes better financial decisions almost automatically. The relationships improve, not because they read a book about communication, but because a person with genuine emotional maturity shows up differently in every conversation. The health improves, not because of a specific program, but because a person who respects themselves tends, naturally, to make choices that reflect that respect. Everything multiplies. Not because they fixed each thing separately, because they fixed the source. This is the idea I want to sit with you in for a moment, because I think it is genuinely revolutionary for the people who allow it to land. We have been taught, by culture, by the self-help industry, by the compartmentalized way we tend to think about our lives, that improvement happens category by category. You fix your finances by learning about finances. You fix your health by following a health protocol. You fix your relationships by working on your communication skills. And while none of that advice is wrong, it misses something fundamental. It treats the symptoms rather than the source. It works on the outputs rather than the input. And the input, the person generating all of those outputs, remains unchanged. Imagine trying to improve the quality of water coming from a tap without addressing the quality of the source it comes from. You can filter it, treat it, add minerals, adjust the temperature. But if the source is compromised, you are managing a problem rather than solving it. Building yourself is going to the source. Now here is where I need to introduce something that might make you a little uncomfortable, because I think discomfort is often the price of genuine insight. When your life is not where you want it to be, when the finances are tight, the relationships are strained, the sense of purpose is dim, the body is not well, it is very tempting and very human to look outward for the explanation. The economy, the partner, the boss, the timing, the circumstances you were born into. And some of those things are real factors. I am not dismissing the genuine role that external circumstances play. But here is the question I want you to sit with. In the areas where your life is genuinely not working, if you removed every external explanation, every circumstance you cannot control, every other person involved, what remains? What is the part that belongs entirely to you? Not the part you caused, necessarily, but the part you can change. The part that is within your influence right now, today, with the resources you currently have. Because that part, however small, however uncomfortable to acknowledge, is the only part that matters. It is the only part you can actually do anything about. Let me ask you something that I want you to answer with complete honesty, not for me but for yourself. In the most important areas of your life, the ones where you feel the most dissatisfied, the most behind, the most like things should be different, have you given those areas the best version of you? Or have you given them a version of you that was depleted, distracted, operating on old patterns, managing rather than leading, reacting rather than creating? Because most people, when they look honestly, realize that the areas of their lives that are struggling have rarely received the best version of the person they are capable of being. They have received the default version, the automatic version, the version that shows up when no deliberate thought has been given to how to show up. And here is the important thing to understand. The areas of your life will only ever be as strong as the version of you they receive. Which means the single most important thing you can do for your your relationships, your health, your sense of purpose, is to become a stronger, clearer, more deliberately developed version of yourself. I want to introduce you to an idea that I think is one of the most important in all of personal development, and one of the least discussed. The idea is that your level of development as a person sets a ceiling on every area of your life. Not a floor, a ceiling. You cannot build a business that operates at a higher level than you do. You cannot sustain a relationship that requires more emotional maturity than you currently possess. You cannot manage money at a level beyond your financial discipline and mindset. The ceiling of your development is the ceiling of your results. And this is both the most humbling and the most empowering idea available to you right now. Humbling, because it means that the limitations you are experiencing are not primarily external, they are developmental. And empowering, because development is something you can actually do something about. You cannot change the economy. You cannot change the past. But you can raise your ceiling. Deliberately. Daily. One choice, one practice, one commitment at a time. Here is the question that nobody asks, and that I think changes everything when you finally do ask it. The question is not, what do I need to do to improve my life? The question is, who do I need to become for my life to reflect my highest values and fullest potential? Those are not the same question. The first question leads to a list of tasks, and tasks, completed without a corresponding shift in identity, tend not to hold. The second question leads somewhere much more fundamental. It leads to a deep, honest, sometimes uncomfortable examination of the gap between who you currently are and who you are capable of being. And it asks you to close that gap not through performance or strategy, but through the slow, consistent, daily work of genuine personal development. Of actually building the qualities that the life you want requires. Not pretending to have them, building them. One day at a time. Let me be specific about what that building actually looks like in practice, because I think it is important to bring this idea down from the philosophical and into the concrete. Building yourself, in the most practical sense, means identifying the specific internal qualities that are currently limiting your results, and then designing your daily life to develop those qualities. If the quality that is limiting you most is discipline, the ability to follow through on commitments even in the absence of motivation, then building yourself means creating daily structures that exercise that quality, that strengthen it the way physical exercise strengthens a muscle, that give it practice and repetition until it becomes reliable rather than occasional. If the limiting quality is clarity, a clear sense of your values, your direction, your non-negotiables, then building yourself means creating regular practices of reflection, of honest self-examination, of sitting with the difficult questions rather than allowing the noise of daily life to drown them out. The specific practice depends on the specific quality. But the principle is always the same. Identify what is missing at the foundation and build it deliberately. I want to speak to something that I think affects almost everyone in this audience, and that I believe is one of the primary reasons people arrive at their 40s and 50s feeling behind. And that something is this. At some point, for most people, somewhere in their late 20s or early 30s, the external demands of life became large enough to consume almost all available attention. Career, family, mortgage, responsibilities. And in the face of those demands, the project of personal development, the ongoing, intentional work of becoming a better, clearer, more capable version of yourself, quietly got set aside. Not abandoned dramatically. Just deprioritized. Put in the drawer labeled, someday, when things slow down. And things never slowed down. And someday never arrived. And the years passed. And the version of you that was supposed to be built during those years, the version that would have handled the challenges with more grace, the version that would have made better decisions under pressure, the version that would have led from strength rather than fear, that version was never fully constructed. And here you are, running the software of your 30s in the hardware of your 50s, and wondering why things feel harder than they should. I want to offer you something that I think is genuinely hopeful, even in the middle of that honest reckoning. The fact that you are here, watching this, engaging with these ideas, that is not nothing. That is actually something quite specific. It is the part of you that has not given up on the possibility of becoming more than you currently are. It is the part of you that looks at your life with clear eyes and says, this is not the full version. There is more available. And I am willing to do what it takes to access it. That voice, that stubborn, persistent, refusing to be silenced voice, is the beginning of everything. It is the seed of every transformation I have ever witnessed in a person's life. And what it needs from you is not heroism. It does not need you to tear your life apart and start over. It needs you to give it 1 hour. One daily practice. One non-negotiable commitment to the work of building yourself, and then to trust, on the days when the results are invisible, that the work is doing exactly what work does when it's done consistently. It is compounding. So here is the question that I want to leave hanging in the air as we move into the deeper part of this conversation, the question that I want you to carry with you, that I want working in the background of your mind as we go further. The question is, if you spent the next 12 months genuinely, consistently, non-negotiably investing in the development of yourself, your character, your discipline, your clarity, your emotional depth, what would change? Not what might change in theory. What would actually, realistically, concretely change in the specific areas of your life that are currently the most frustrating? Hold that question. Because the answer to it, your honest, specific, personal answer, is the map of the next chapter of your life. And we are about to start reading it together. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Robert. Robert is 53 years old. He is intelligent, experienced, deeply knowledgeable in his field, and by almost every external measure a successful person. He has a career that commands respect, a family he loves, a house that reflects decades of work and sacrifice. But Robert has a problem that he has never fully named out loud, because naming it would require a level of honesty that is more uncomfortable than the problem itself. The problem is this: Robert has been the same person for 20 years. Not in the sense that he hasn't changed at all. Of course life has changed him, age has changed him, experience has changed him. But in the sense that the qualities that limit him at 53 are essentially the same qualities that limited him at 33. The same impatience under pressure. The same tendency to avoid difficult conversations. The same gap between the person he presents to the world and the person he knows himself to be in the private hours. He has been very busy. He has worked very hard. But he has not built himself. And the ceiling of his development has quietly become the ceiling of everything else. What makes Robert's story particularly painful, and I say this with complete compassion, because his story is not uncommon, is that he is aware of it. Not always, not constantly, but in the honest moments, in the car after a difficult meeting, in the quiet before sleep, in the unguarded conversations with the few people he truly trusts. Robert knows. He knows that the version of himself he presents is not the version he is capable of being. He knows that somewhere between the busyness and the obligations and the path of least resistance, he stopped growing. He stopped asking himself the hard questions. He stopped doing the work that had nothing to do with his career or his finances or his role as a husband and father, the work of becoming more fully, more deliberately, more intentionally himself. And the distance between who he is and who he knows he could be has become, over the years, a source of a very specific and private grief. I want to speak to that grief for a moment, because I think it is more widespread than we acknowledge. There is a particular sadness that comes not from failure but from the sense of unlived potential. From the awareness, quiet, persistent, impossible to fully silence, that there is a version of you that has not yet been expressed. A depth of character that has not yet been fully developed. A quality of presence, of wisdom, of genuine contribution that exists in you as a possibility, but that has never been fully realized because the work required to realize it was always displaced by something more urgent. That sadness is real. It deserves acknowledgement rather than management. And more than acknowledgement, it deserves to be taken seriously as information. Because that persistent sense of unlived potential is not a sign that you are ungrateful for what you have. It is a sign that you are not yet finished becoming who you are meant to be. And you are not finished. Not even close. If you are in your 40s, 50s, or 60s and you are watching this, I want to say something directly to you that I think you need to hear in these specific words. The work of building yourself is not something you do before your real life begins. It is not a preliminary stage that should have been completed by 30. It is the central, ongoing, never-finished work of a life lived with intention. Some of the most profound personal development I have witnessed has happened in people in their 50s and 60s, not in spite of their age, but because of it. Because they had something that younger people rarely possess. A clear view of the consequences of not doing this work. They had lived long enough to see, in their own lives and the lives of people they knew, what happens when character is not deliberately developed? What happens when the ceiling of personal development becomes the ceiling of everything else? And they were ready, in a way that younger people often aren't, to do the work without vanity, without performance, without the need for external validation. Just quietly, daily, and with complete seriousness. I want to address something that comes up often when people begin to engage with the idea of building themselves, a resistance that presents itself as humility but is actually something else. The resistance sounds like this. Who am I to think I need to become something more than what I already am? Isn't this just ego? Isn't the pursuit of self-improvement a kind of rejection of the person I already am? And I want to address that directly, because I think it is one of the most effective forms of self-sabotage available. True humility is not the belief that you are enough and therefore don't need to grow. True humility is the honest acknowledgement of both what you are and what you are capable of becoming, and the willingness to close that gap through sustained effort. The person who says, I am enough as I am, therefore I don't need to grow, is not being humble. They are being comfortable. And there is an enormous difference between those two things. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Carol. Carol is 48 years old. For most of her adult life, she operated on the assumption, never explicitly stated, but deeply embedded, that her value as a person was determined by what she did for others. Her worth was measured in her usefulness. In how well she managed the household, supported her partner's career, raised her children, showed up for her friends, performed her job. She was extraordinarily capable at all of it. But somewhere in the middle of her late 40s, something shifted. Her children became more independent. Her marriage, which had been held together partly by the structure of parenting, began to reveal the emptiness beneath. And Carol found herself sitting in a life that she had built entirely around other people's needs, with very little sense of who she was when those needs were removed. She had given everything. She had built nothing inside herself. And now, at 48, she was beginning the work she should have been doing all along. The work of finding out who Carol actually was, what Carol actually valued, what Carol was actually capable of on her own terms. Carol's story is not a story of failure. It is a story of a very common and very human kind of neglect, the neglect of self in the service of others. And what I want you to understand about Carol is that the work she began at 48, the genuine, honest, sometimes painful work of building herself, did not make her less available to the people she loved. It made her more so. Because a person who knows who they are, who has developed their own internal resources, who operates from a place of genuine capacity rather than chronic self-sacrifice, that person gives differently. They give from abundance. They give with clarity. They give sustainably. The work of building yourself is never a subtraction from your availability to others. It is the foundation that makes genuine contribution possible in the first place. I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most important and least discussed aspects of personal development, particularly for people in the second half of their lives. And that is the relationship between self-knowledge and effectiveness. Most people operate, for most of their lives, with a surprisingly incomplete understanding of themselves. They know their preferences, what they like and don't like, what makes them comfortable or uncomfortable. But genuine self-knowledge is something different. It is the clear understanding of your deepest values, the principles you are unwilling to compromise regardless of the cost. It is the honest recognition of your patterns, the ways you respond under pressure, the defenses you deploy when you feel threatened, the places where your behavior consistently diverges from your intentions. It is the clarity about what you are genuinely capable of and what you are not yet capable of but could develop. This kind of self-knowledge is not acquired passively. It is earned through deliberate reflection, honest feedback, and the willingness to look at yourself without the filters of ego and defensiveness. And here is why self-knowledge matters so much in the context of building a life that works. Every decision you make, every strategy you adopt, every relationship you enter, every commitment you take on, is filtered through your understanding of who you are. A person with clear self-knowledge makes decisions that are congruent with their actual values and actual capacities. They don't overcommit because they understand their limits. They don't undercommit because they understand their strengths. They don't pursue goals that belong to someone else's definition of success because they are clear enough about their own definition. They don't stay in situations that fundamentally conflict with who they are because their sense of identity is strong enough to name the conflict and act on it. Self-knowledge is not navel-gazing. It is the foundation of every good decision you will ever make. And the person who invests in developing it is investing in a resource that pays dividends in every single area of life. I want to offer you one final thought before we move into the part of this conversation where we begin to talk about what the building actually looks like in practice. The thought is this: most people wait for the external circumstances of their life to improve before they begin the work of internal development. They think, when things calm down, when I have more time, when the financial pressure eases, when the kids are older, then I'll do the work of becoming more fully myself. But this is exactly backwards. The external circumstances do not improve and then make space for internal development. Internal development happens first, and then, as a natural consequence, the external circumstances begin to reflect it. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily, inevitably, in the quiet and compounding way that all genuine development works. You do not wait for your life to give you room to grow. You grow, and your life reorganizes itself around the person you are becoming. There is a question I want you to ask yourself right now. Not later, right now, while the idea is fresh and the conversation is alive. The question is, in the most important area of your life, the one that causes you the most pain, the most frustration, the most sense of falling short, what would a fundamentally better version of you do differently? Not a perfect version. Not a version that has everything figured out. But a version that is 10% more disciplined. 10% more emotionally clear. 10% more honest about what matters and what doesn't. What would that version do that you are not currently doing? Because I want to suggest to you that the answer to that question, specific, honest, personal, is the beginning of the map, not the destination. Just the first step on the map. And taking that step, just that one step, consistently, daily, without waiting for conditions to be perfect, is how the building begins. I want to talk about what I consider to be the most undervalued quality in personal development. Not discipline, though discipline matters enormously. Not intelligence, not creativity, not strategic thinking. The quality I am talking about is integrity. And I do not mean integrity in the narrow sense of honesty with other people, though that is certainly part of it. I mean integrity in the deeper sense, the alignment between your values and your actions. The degree to which what you do matches what you say you believe. The degree to which the daily texture of your life reflects your stated priorities. Most people have a significant gap between their values and their actions. They say they value their health and consistently deprioritize it. They say they value their relationships and consistently give them the leftover energy at the end of the day. They say they value their own growth and consistently find reasons to postpone it. This gap is not just a strategic problem. It is a character problem. And closing it, not perfectly, not all at once, but daily, deliberately, honestly, is one of the most powerful forms of self-building available. I want to introduce a concept that I think is essential for understanding why some people grow and others don't, even when they are exposed to the same ideas and given the same opportunities. The concept is what I call the inner standard. Every person has an inner standard, a largely unconscious sense of the minimum acceptable version of themselves. A baseline below which they will not allow themselves to fall without significant internal discomfort. For some people, that standard is very high. They cannot sleep well if they have not done the work they committed to, if they have allowed their behavior to fall below their values, if they have not shown up in the way they believe a person of character shows up. For others, the inner standard has been quietly lowered over the years, through a series of small compromises, until almost anything is acceptable as long as it maintains the surface appearance of a functional life. Building yourself, in this frame, is the process of raising your inner standard. Not the standard you announce to others. The standard you hold for yourself alone, in the private hours, when the only audience is your own conscience. The raising of that inner standard does not happen through motivation or inspiration, however powerful those experiences might be in the short term. It happens through action. Specifically, through the repeated experience of acting in accordance with a higher standard even when you don't feel like it, and allowing the resulting sense of self-respect to become its own reward. Every time you do what you said you would do, when you said you would do it, for no reason other than that you said you would, your inner standard rises slightly. Every time you choose the harder, more honest, more principled option when the easier option was available, your inner standard rises. Every time you hold yourself accountable without external enforcement, without an audience, without a reward on the other side, your inner standard rises. And the person whose inner standard has been raised through 1,000 such choices is not the same person they were before those choices. They are more. They can do more. They can sustain more. They can contribute more. And everything in their life reflects it. Let me come back to Robert for a moment, because his story has a second chapter. At 54, Robert had a conversation with an old friend, someone who had known him for 30 years, who loved him genuinely, and who was willing to say something that most people in Robert's life had never said. The friend said, simply, "I think you've been running on autopilot for a long time. And I think it's costing you more than you realize." Robert didn't respond immediately. He didn't argue or deflect, which was his usual response to feedback that touched something real. He sat with it. And over the following weeks, in the quiet space that the comment had opened, he began to do something he hadn't done in years. He began to examine himself. Not his performance. Not his output. Himself. His patterns. His automatic responses. The places where his behavior was driven by fear or habit or the desire to maintain a certain image rather than by genuine values and deliberate choice. What Robert found in that examination was not what he expected. He expected to find laziness or weakness or some fundamental inadequacy. What he found instead was a person who had been working extraordinarily hard, but working hard at maintaining the surface rather than developing the foundation. A person who had mastered the performance of competence while quietly avoiding the development of depth. A person who had built an impressive life around a self that had not kept pace with it. And when he saw that clearly, when he stopped managing the insight and allowed it to fully land, something shifted. Not dramatically. He didn't quit his job or move to a different country or make any announcement about his transformation. He just quietly, privately, began to do the work. Every morning, before the day started, he spent 30 minutes with a journal and 3 questions. What did I do well yesterday that reflected my values? Where did my actions fall short of them? And what is one specific thing I can do today to close that gap? Simple questions. Daily practice. Over the course of a year, Robert became someone his younger self would have recognized and respected. I want to talk about the relationship between building yourself and the people you love, because I think it is one of the most important and least discussed dimensions of this work. When you commit to genuinely developing yourself, when you begin the daily practice of raising your inner standard, of closing the gap between your values and your behavior, of becoming a more disciplined, more emotionally honest, more fully realized version of yourself, the people closest to you notice. Not immediately. Not all at once. But they notice. Your children notice when the parent who used to react under pressure begins to respond instead. Your partner notices when the person who used to avoid difficult conversations begins to lean into them with honesty and care. Your colleagues notice when the person who used to manage from a place of anxiety begins to lead from a place of genuine clarity. You do not need to announce your development. You simply need to demonstrate it. Consistently. In the ordinary moments. And the world around you will reorganize itself, slowly and surely, around the better version of you that is showing up. Here is something that I think is worth sitting with, because it touches something that many people in this audience carry. The feeling, sometimes vague, sometimes acute, that it is too late to become the person you were supposed to be. That the window for genuine transformation has passed, that the formative years are behind you, that what you are now is largely what you will be. I want to challenge that feeling not with empty reassurance, but with something more useful, a question. Can you name a single quality of character, a single internal attribute, that a person cannot develop at 45, or 55, or 65? Patience, discipline, honesty, emotional resilience, clarity of values, generosity of spirit, the capacity for genuine reflection. These are not qualities that atrophy past a certain age. They are qualities that, in fact, often deepen with age when they are deliberately cultivated. The question is not whether you can still build them. The question is whether you are willing to begin. I want to speak about something that I think is quietly epidemic among people in the second half of their lives. A kind of emotional flatness, not depression, exactly, but a dimming. A gradual narrowing of the range of what feels genuinely alive. The sharp edges of experience, the excitement, the fear, the passion, the sense of genuine engagement with one's own life, softening into something more managed, more muted, more controlled. And while some of this is a natural and even healthy development, the wisdom to not be blown about by every passing wind, some of it is the cost of not growing, of operating on the same emotional and psychological software for 20 years without updating it. The person who is genuinely building themselves, who is regularly encountering their own edges, regularly doing things that are slightly beyond their current capacity, regularly being honest with themselves in ways that create productive discomfort, that person does not experience that flatness. They remain, even in their 60s, genuinely alive to their own experience. Not recklessly, not naively, but vitally. And that vitality is available to you, right now, if you are willing to do the work. Everything we have been building toward in this conversation is pointing in a single direction. And the direction is not outward, toward better strategies, better systems, better circumstances. The direction is inward, and then forward. Inward first, to look honestly at the person you currently are, with all the clarity and compassion you would bring to looking at someone you deeply love. To see the gap between who you are and who you are capable of being, not with self-condemnation but with genuine curiosity and genuine commitment. And then forward, to begin the daily practice of closing that gap. One quality at a time. One choice at a time. One ordinary morning at a time. This is the work. And it is the only work that actually changes anything in a lasting way. Because everything in your life, every external result, every relationship, every experience of meaning or its absence, everything is downstream from who you are. Build yourself first, and watch everything else begin to multiply. Let's talk about what building yourself actually looks like in practice. Not in theory, in the specific, daily, non-glamorous reality of a person who has made this commitment and is doing the work. Because I think one of the reasons people resist this idea is that it sounds vague. Build yourself. Develop your character. Raise your inner standard. These are beautiful ideas. But what do you actually do at 7 in the morning on a Wednesday? What is the practice? And I want to be very specific here, because I think specificity is the difference between an idea that inspires and an idea that transforms. The practice of building yourself begins with one non-negotiable daily commitment to your own development. Not to your responsibilities, not to your productivity, not to your performance at work or your role in your family. One commitment that belongs entirely to the work of becoming a better version of you. For some people, that commitment is a daily period of reflection, 15 or 30 minutes of honest journaling, asking specific questions about where they are falling short of their own values and what they can do differently today. Not vague questions. Specific ones. Where did my behavior yesterday not match what I say I believe? What patterns showed up that I recognize? What would the person I am trying to become have done differently? This kind of daily honest reflection is not comfortable. It asks you to be your own most honest witness, not your harshest critic, but your most honest one. And the insight it produces, accumulated over weeks and months, is one of the most powerful forces for genuine personal change available. You begin to see your patterns clearly enough to interrupt them. You begin to notice the gap between your values and your actions with enough regularity that the gap begins to feel genuinely uncomfortable, and that discomfort becomes the motivation to close it. For others, the daily practice of building yourself takes the form of deliberate exposure to difficulty. Not suffering for its own sake, but the intentional choosing of the harder path in specific, targeted areas. The conversation you have been avoiding because it is uncomfortable. The physical practice that tests your endurance. The creative work that requires you to sit with uncertainty and produce something anyway. The commitment you honor even on the days when honoring it costs you something. Each of these is not just a task completed. Each of them is a vote for a specific identity, the identity of a person who can be relied upon to do what is difficult when it is necessary. And the accumulation of those votes, day after day, is the building of character in the most literal possible sense. You are not reading about character. You are not admiring it in others. You are constructing it, one deliberate choice at a time, in the architecture of your own daily life. I want to talk about one of the most powerful and least glamorous practices available to someone who is serious about building themselves. The practice of keeping their word to themselves. This sounds simple. It is, in practice, remarkably difficult. Because we live in a world that constantly negotiates. We negotiate with our calendars, with our commitments, with our stated intentions. We make agreements with ourselves. I will do this today, I will start this Monday, I will not do that again, and then we find very reasonable, very understandable reasons why this particular instance is an exception. And each exception, however justified, trains the part of the brain that is responsible for self-trust to expect the exception, to build in the caveat, to treat the commitment as provisional rather than real. The person who wants to build themselves must begin treating their commitments to themselves with the same seriousness they treat their commitments to others. Not because others are more important, but because the self-trust that develops from consistently keeping your own word is one of the most powerful forces in human development. It is the ground everything else is built on. Let me speak about something that is often missing from the conversation about personal development, and that I believe is absolutely central to the idea of building yourself first. That something is values clarity. Most people have a general sense of what they value: family, honesty, hard work, health. But when you press them to be specific, when you ask them to rank their values, to define what each one means in behavioral terms, to describe what it actually looks like to live by those values on a difficult Wednesday, the answers become much hazier. And this haziness is not a minor problem. It is the source of most of the inconsistency, most of the chronic guilt, most of the gap between intention and action. Because you cannot consistently live by values that you have not clearly defined. You cannot make decisions that honor your priorities when you haven't honestly established what those priorities are. Values clarity, the specific, honest, non-negotiable articulation of what you actually believe and who you actually want to be, is not a soft, philosophical exercise. It is one of the most practically powerful things you can do for the quality of every area of your life. I want to give you something concrete. An exercise that takes 30 minutes and that, if done honestly, can provide more genuine direction than months of unfocused self-improvement activity. Sit down with a piece of paper, not a phone, not a laptop, paper, and at the top write, who am I when I am at my best? Not who I want to be. Not who I'm performing being. Who I actually am in the moments when I feel most genuinely myself, most fully alive, most clearly in alignment with what I believe. Write for 15 minutes without stopping. Don't edit. Don't evaluate. Just write. Then, on a second page, write, what is the specific gap between that person and the person I am on an average day? Not a global condemnation, a specific, honest list of the places where the average version of you falls short of the best version. And then, on a third page, write, what is one daily practice that would close the most important part of that gap? Just one. Specific. Repeatable. Non-negotiable. That practice is your building block. That is where the construction begins. I want to speak about something that becomes particularly powerful when you are building yourself from a foundation of genuine values clarity. And that is decision-making. One of the most exhausting and least acknowledged forms of daily depletion is the energy consumed by decisions that should not be difficult but are, because the person making them doesn't have a clear enough sense of their own values to make the decision quickly and confidently. When your values are clear, decisions that previously required agonizing deliberation become almost automatic. You don't spend an hour deciding whether to have the difficult conversation, because you have already decided, at the level of identity, that you are a person who doesn't avoid difficult conversations. You don't spend a week deliberating about the financial choice, because your values around security, generosity, and long-term thinking are clear enough to make the right answer obvious. Clarity of values does not just tell you who you are. It tells you what to do. It converts complexity into simplicity. And simplicity is the foundation of effective action. Here is the part of this conversation that I think has the potential to change things permanently, if you let it. Everything I have been describing, the daily practice, the values clarity, the honest self-examination, the raising of the inner standard, all of it is in service of a single outcome. Not a financial outcome. Not a career outcome. Not even a health outcome, though all of those will be affected. The single outcome that all of this serves is this: the experience of being someone you genuinely respect. Not someone others respect, though that may follow. Someone you respect. Someone who, when you look at yourself honestly in the quiet moments, you recognize as a person of genuine character. Someone whose word means something, whose actions reflect their values, whose presence is a contribution rather than a performance. That experience, the quiet, unannounced, privately held experience of being a person you respect, is the foundation of a life that actually works. It is the source of the genuine confidence that no external validation can produce or replace. And it is available to you. Built, not given. Earned, not granted. Yours, if you are willing to do the work. I want to address one final obstacle before we close this part of the conversation. The obstacle is the belief that the qualities required for this kind of growth, the discipline, the emotional honesty, the capacity for sustained self-examination, are fixed. That they are either present or absent, either something you have or something you don't. And I want to be absolutely clear, that belief is wrong. Every quality of character is a skill. Every skill is a practice. And every practice improves with repetition. The person who believes they are not disciplined is usually a person who has never given their discipline the sustained daily exercise it needs to develop. The person who believes they are not emotionally honest is usually a person who has never created the safe, consistent space in which emotional honesty can be practiced. These are not fixed traits. They are underdeveloped capacities. And the process of developing them, quietly, daily, without announcement, is exactly what we mean when we say, build yourself first. And when you do, when you commit to this work, when you give it the daily non-negotiable attention it deserves, when you stop treating the development of your own character as optional or secondary or something to get to when the urgent things are handled, something begins to happen that I want to prepare you for. Because it is subtle enough that many people miss it. The external areas of your life begin to shift. Not because you made a plan for them, but because the person engaging with them has changed. The same financial situation, handled by a person with greater discipline, greater clarity, greater self-trust, produces different results. The same relationship, engaged by a person with greater emotional depth and greater integrity, produces a different quality of connection. The same career, inhabited by a person with a clearer sense of their own values and a stronger inner standard, produces a different level of contribution. Everything multiplies. Not because the circumstances changed, because you did. I want to come back to Robert one final time, because I think his story deserves an ending that honors what is possible. At 56, 2 years into his daily practice of honest self-examination, 2 years of raising his inner standard one choice at a time, Robert said something to his old friend that I think captures everything we've been discussing today. He said, "I don't think I changed my life. I think I changed myself. And then my life changed to match." And that sentence, quietly, without drama, without a single hashtag or announcement, contains the entire philosophy of what we've been talking about. He did not fix his finances and then feel better about himself. He became a more disciplined, more values-aligned, more internally coherent version of himself, and his financial decisions naturally improved. He did not improve his marriage by working on his marriage. He became more emotionally honest, more patient, more genuinely present, and his marriage naturally deepened. He built himself first, and everything else multiplied. I want to speak now to the person who is sitting with all of this and feeling something that might best be described as a mixture of hope and heaviness. The hope comes from recognizing something true in these ideas, something that resonates with what you already know at a deep level. The heaviness comes from the weight of years spent not doing this work, and the sense of distance between where you are and where you could have been. I want to speak to that heaviness directly and honestly. The years you did not do this work are not wasted. They are not evidence of inadequacy. They are the experience that makes the work, when you finally begin it, carry a depth and a seriousness that it could not have had at 25. The person who begins building themselves at 50 has something that the 25-year-old does not, a complete and vivid understanding of what it costs not to. And that understanding, held honestly, is not a burden. It is fuel. Here is something I want to say about the nature of this work that I think is important and often misunderstood. Building yourself is not a project with a completion date. It is not something you do intensively for 6 months and then consider done. It is a permanent orientation, a way of moving through your life that is characterized by ongoing, honest engagement with the question of who you are and who you are becoming. The specifics of the practice will change as you grow. What requires daily effort at 52 may become second nature by 55. New edges will emerge. New areas of development will reveal themselves. The work is never finished because the person doing it is never finished. And rather than experiencing that as overwhelming, I want to invite you to experience it as one of the most enlivening ideas available to a human being. You are not a fixed object moving through time. You are a dynamic, developing, continuously emerging person. And the orientation of genuine self-building keeps that emergence alive, keeps you, in the deepest sense, genuinely and vitally in the process of becoming. I want to talk about what happens to the people around you when you commit to building yourself. Because I think this is one of the most underappreciated dimensions of this work, and one of the most powerful arguments for taking it seriously. When you become more disciplined, the people who live and work with you experience more reliability. When you become more emotionally honest, the people who are in relationship with you experience more genuine connection. When you become clearer about your values and more consistent in living by them, the people who look to you, whether as a parent, a partner, a colleague, a friend, receive something from you that they could not receive before. A clear, consistent, trustworthy model of what it looks like to be a person of character. You do not teach this by talking about it. You teach it by being it. And the people who receive that teaching, who grow up watching it, or who work alongside it, or who share their lives with it, are changed by it in ways that neither you nor they will ever fully trace or measure. I want to offer you the most important practical insight I can give you about how to actually begin this work, not just understand it, but begin it. The insight is this: start smaller than you think you need to. The instinct, when we are genuinely moved by an idea, is to make a large commitment, to overhaul everything, to announce a transformation. And that instinct, however genuine, almost always produces the same result. A strong beginning followed by a gradual fade, followed by the familiar disappointment, followed by a slightly lower belief in your own capacity for change. Instead, and I cannot emphasize this enough, Start with something so small it almost seems beneath the ambition of the goal. One journal page per morning. One honest question answered each evening. One difficult conversation per week that you would previously have avoided. One daily commitment, whatever it is, kept without exception for 30 days. Not because those small things will produce dramatic results in 30 days, but because they will prove to you, in the most concrete possible way, that you are a person capable of keeping their word to themselves. And that proof is the foundation everything else is built on. I want to speak about legacy one more time, in the most immediate and personal sense possible. Not what will be said about you when you are gone. What is being built right now, in the daily quality of your presence and your character, in the lives of the people who are close enough to you to be genuinely shaped by who you are. Your children, if you have them, are not primarily learning from what you tell them. They are learning from who you are. From watching whether the person who talks about integrity actually demonstrates it in the small moments. From watching whether the person who talks about discipline actually keeps their commitments when it's hard. From watching whether the person who talks about the importance of growth is actually growing. Every day of your genuine self-development is a day of genuine mentorship for the people who are watching, and people are always watching more carefully than you realize, particularly the ones who love you most. Here is a thought I want to leave with you, because I think it is one of the most genuinely hopeful ideas I know. The investment you make in building yourself is the only investment that cannot be taken away. Your money can be lost. Your status can be diminished. Your health can be challenged. Your circumstances can shift in ways that are entirely outside your control. But the character you build, the discipline, the clarity, the integrity, the emotional depth, the capacity for genuine contribution, that is yours. Permanently. Unconditionally. It travels with you through every circumstance, every loss, every change of season. A person of genuine character can lose everything external and rebuild. A person who has built nothing internal can accumulate everything external and still feel empty. The investment in yourself is the one investment with a guaranteed return, and the return is not a number on a balance sheet. It is the lived experience of being a person you genuinely respect, in a life that genuinely reflects your values. There is nothing more valuable than that. I want to give you something specific to do today. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, today. I want you to take 10 minutes, just 10, and write down the answer to this question. In the most important area of my life right now, what quality of character, if genuinely developed, would make the greatest difference? Not what action to take. What quality to develop? Patience, discipline, honesty, emotional courage, clarity, consistency. Whatever the quality is, name it specifically. And then write down one daily practice, one small, repeatable, non-negotiable action that exercises that quality. 1. Not 5. 1. And commit to that practice for 30 days, with no exceptions and no renegotiation. At the end of 30 days, you will not have transformed your life. But you will have done something more important. You will have proved to yourself that you are a person who builds. A person who keeps their word. A person who, when given the choice between comfort and growth, chooses growth. And that proof, held quietly, privately, without announcement, is the beginning of everything. And so I will close today with this. You came here today, perhaps, looking for strategies. 4 tips. For the specific steps that will finally close the gap between the life you have and the life you want. And I hope you found something more useful than that. I hope you found a reorientation, a shift in the fundamental question you are asking. Not what to do differently, who to become. Because the person you become is the answer to every question your life is currently asking. Build that person first. Give that work the daily seriousness and the non-negotiable commitment it deserves. And then watch, patiently, steadily, without demanding that the results arrive on your timeline, as the world around you begins to reflect back the person you are building from the inside out. Build yourself first, and everything else multiplies. I have never seen it fail, and I do not believe it will fail for you. Stay close, because in our next conversation, we are going to talk about the single force that has derailed more personal transformations than any other. The force that waits quietly inside every serious commitment, that surfaces at exactly the moment when the building is beginning to produce results, and that, if you are not prepared for it, will undo in a week what took months to construct. You will want to be ready for that conversation.